So, as we all pretty much know by now, the Brexiteers were pretty much insistent that Brexit was all about trade until it wasn't about trade, it was about something else, and then you would be talking about that, and then it would all be about trade again. And we've seen this pattern play out time and time and time again. But, as we have said before, not only do Brexiteers not understand the EU and indeed the situation that we've put ourselves in of being a third country. Indeed, many of the rules that many of the Brexiteers are now claiming about are rules that we helped create. Indeed, in some areas, indeed in the fishing industry, we were key areas and creators of those rules that they are now so annoyed about taking on. But, as we said, we are now looking forward to, quote, new fantastic trade deals. But, as we've said before, you have a huge problem because there are two big ideas currently competing in the Tory party. The first one is the levelling up agenda, and the second one is Global Britain. And I think that Global Britain is going to be the one that most Tories, at least this point in time, certainly seem to want to go for. But the thing is, you can't have these two big ideas because Global Britain is all about going to other countries, getting rid of tariffs, and bringing exports, or should we say imports, to the country. And the big problem is if you do that, your own homegrown industries then have increased competition. Now, this isn't always necessarily a good thing, even though competition is good. Not necessarily all the time, because especially if you are facing foreign imports that now have lower tariffs and have access to your market, you will often find, as we've talked about before, of all these companies now deciding to flood the market with their new produce, which basically means that now homegrown produce either has two options. It can either maintain a very high standard and then have to increase its price, which means lower sales, which means it loses its own share in its own homegrown market. Or it can go, okay, we're going to have to slash our own standards or push for our own standards to go so that we can essentially join in this race to the bottom. And wine in particular is a big area because people like the guy who owned Wetherspoons was constantly talking about how it would be great to have all this, quote, cheaper Australian and New Zealand wine. But yet today we've had a look at one of the possible previews, or at least leaks, from this Australian trade deal. And basically, a wine drinker in the UK is set to save about £100. Except when you actually look at the figures, obviously leaked by Brexiteers, many are suspecting, when you look into these figures, they don't actually work out, because it actually turns out that to save £100, a wine drinker here in the UK would have to drink at least 3 bottles a day for a year to save that £100. And as we've already said, all these new fantastic trade deals that we're getting, the more you look at them, the less fantastic they seem because, as always, the devil's in the detail. But sticking with our talking about wine, how is the UK wine industry actually reacting to Brexit? How is it holding up? Well, to that today, we are turning to that. So before we do jump into that, please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page, as well as a one-up donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, well, buy me a coffee. And thank you to all the people who do support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee every so often. Like I say, on with the article. So, as I've said before, sometimes you've got to look really obscure to get some really good articles. But today, we are going to winesearcher.com, and it is an industry wine site, the best way to describe it. So, and the title is Brexit Batters the British Wine Trade. So, Shipping wine to the UK is an absolute bloody nightmare, and it's only likely to get worse. Is there more a disingenuous statement than get Brexit done? Almost 5 years have passed since the United Kingdom voted to leave the EU, but the hard work is only just beginning, and I hope and pray that the great British public will eventually come to their senses. Surely they'll realise that frictionless trade with the world's largest economic bloc was actually quite a good idea. The alternative is too horrific to even contemplate. After only 4 months of trading with our European neighbours as a third country, Britain is feeling immense pain. Exports to the EU plummeted in February. Our fishing industry is collapsing. Tensions are boiling over in Northern Ireland, and manufacturers are moving jobs and prosperity away from the UK. And who can blame them? When just-in-time manufacturing has been so completely screwed to the cornucopia of a Soviet-grade bureaucracy. The EU and the UK trade deal both abolished tariffs on goods but neglected to address financial services or the harsh realities for the violent lurch into a new trading framework. And a lot of the post-Brexit changes are challenging even under the British public's noses, says Philip Cox, owner of the Romanian winery Calmly Reyes. There is a Ford factory near my winery in the city of Corvina, and since Brexit happened, Ford has been moving production and personnel away from the UK factory in Dagenham, at an impressive rate. Great for the Romanian economy, but another example of the self-inflicted pain caused by this absolutely ridiculous project. And from the outset, Cox has been a staunch critic of this Brexit madness. We've spoken several times over the past 6 months, and now, there we go. I'm now on his Christmas card list. He remains incredulous that more European wineries aren't vocalising their criticisms of the new trading regulation. To be succinct, shipping wine to the UK has become an absolute bloody nightmare, exclaims Cox. Every order requires a mountain of paperwork, customs declarations, perfectual origin certificates, importer labelling. Exporting has become expensive, time-wasting and cumbersome, and the heightened administrative costs have forced me to ditch some of my smaller UK customers. Exporting relatively small volumes is no longer viable. The cost of shipping to the UK has risen by €400,000 a year, and post-Brexit logistics, says Cox, makes Dante's Inferno seem like a pleasant afternoon in a day spa. I attempted to interview a European shipping firm, but encountered the impenetrable wall of no comment, and one Dutch-based company would share some information, but strictly off the record. Prices have increased due to problems caused by Brexit. The market has changed considerably, and the lack of return loads from the UK and lack of capacity allocated to the UK market has caused prices to increase, said the representative of the company. Verbally, all transporters tell us of long delays due to new customs and paperwork requirements. This is losing them time and thus money. And as they only earn money per trip rather than per day, this also less trip means now less money. And yet, he insists that the situation could be far worse. As it stands today, UK customs and excisers are foregoing extensive checks on goods entering to the country. So, to do so would grind our island nations to a halt, argues Cox. God help us when we instigate full customs checks in 2022, he says. The UK border infrastructure is a complete joke. It simply cannot cope with the new levels of checks and bureaucratic procedures. This is why most of the European goods are being waved through. This would be a fantastic time to smuggle drugs and people into the UK. So why aren't more European wineries sharing their disgruntlement about this. The larger companies are undoubtedly partly insulated due to favourable economies of scale. Especially a growing fragment of boutique labels will probably disengage from the UK, as it becomes financially unworkable to export smaller volumes. Discreetly, several wineries have also confirmed that they plan to do just that. From their perspective, this island is no longer a good place to be. Fortunately, there are other markets to explore, other fish to fry. The net upshot is going to be higher prices and less choice for the British customer. We could become a glorious nation of amorphous mass market brands. Our shipping charges have to be altered. We used to be charged per case, which meant that we could ship tiny parcels from some growers, and now we are charged per pallet and have a sliding economy of scale. This puts our smaller suppliers at a real disadvantage, says Subin Audrey, buying director of Hayes, Hansen and Clark. They're a leading importer of niche brands, and these businesses keep wines exciting. But they do not need this extra hassle. Yet, the resistance to share opinions grows deeper than just stoicism. Brexit remains a highly sensitive and politically charged issue. The so-called healing process has not yet occurred. Remain and Leave voters are still bitterly divided. In that context, it's understandable that wine producers do not want to offend the sensibilities of their customers. The wine industry is notorious for refusing to pick a side. However, the British press have no such qualms. Unless you're a lefty liberal like me, you'd think Brexit had been an unmitigated triumph. The Guardian, Financial Times, and a few outlying publications have documented the catastrophic damage caused by our succession from the EU. But the majority of the press have been engaged in relentless breastbeating about the benefits of standing alone. The EU's folly with its vaccination programme has become the Conservatives' rallying cry for further disentanglement. The ultimate proof that we're better off without the cabal of evil bureaucrats in Brussels. Tell that to the European wineries basically accepting to send vital samples to the UK. COVID is a nightmare, and so is Brexit, says Al Marin, the co-owner of champagne brand A.R. Leblanc. It looks like sending a bottle of champagne to the UK has become a severe challenge. Prior to 2021, we worked with the company Chronopost. However, they refused to do deliveries for us since they could be unable to do a deal with the UK after Brexit. It's unbelievable. But I suppose it could be worse. The British government has once again delayed the introduction of wine import certificates. This additional piece of bureaucracy was set to create and to replace the VI1 forms, which the EU currently uses to regulate import non-European wines. Unless things change in the interim, it will come into force in 2020. And the introduction of the new wine import certificates would be the final straw, says Cox. It duplicates information already contained in other documents, invoice, customs declarations, etc. I'd have to complete a 200-page form and obtain 200 customs stamps. And Cox is determined to stop that from happening. He has taken his illegal case to the Romanian court. Under EU law, any regulation enacted must serve a recognisable purpose. He intends to argue that the import certificates serve no purpose. And I think this may be escalated to the European Court of Justice. However, the expenses involved would be considerable, which is why I need to collaborate with other producers to share expertise and legal costs. Thus far, few wineries are willing to take the travel with me. There appears to be the attitude that the British should be left to stew in their own mess. Still, let's look on the bright side. Britain has restored its, quote, cherished national sovereignty, or so I'm told. But do Leave voters feel any more British? And have their erstwhile miserable lives been turned around, now that we're, quote, independent from the monstrous EU? And unsurprising in a patriotic fever may delight some. But it's probably a weak substitute for manufacturing jobs, prosperity and growth, or the wider choice of cheaper wines. I suspect that with time, the terrible truth will dawn. There was never an upside to leaving the EU. Our existing deal is mind-numbingly bad. Ongoing support for Brexit has become the last refuge of the imbecile, and one day the penny might drop. And that's essentially the view. I mean, this is going to happen to every industry. And do not be shocked that some industries don't like to speak out, because a lot of industries don't like to get political. But I think the more Brexit goes on, the more of these companies are going to add their voice to this weight. And I think sooner or later, it was predicted a while back that sooner or later, like, the core voice for rejoining the EU is potentially going to come from conservatives in, the middle line conservatives like David Cameron. And indeed, they got kicked out. The moderate conservatives got kicked out of the party. So it's very likely that if Boris Johnson goes and causes probably an absolute mess in the Conservative Party, which potentially it could do, and who knows what could happen in this week if all the stuff coming out Boris Johnson continues to gather speed and pace. Who knows where we could be by the end of the week. But yeah, it's an absolute madness at the moment, and more industries are going to start pushing for that. And ultimately, if the Conservatives really do believe that they want to be the champions of British business, then ultimately a lot of them are going to have to start acquiescing to the fact that we're going to have to rejoin the EU. And all the other businesses are probably going to get them in line as well for that. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share and subscribe button. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And as always, thank you for all those people that do support me that way. And of course, we'll see you all next time.